From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the daily news brief on Telesur English. We begin this new edition right now. We begin in Ecuador, where there have been some strong reactions to the 6-year jail sentence given to the country's vice president, Jorge Glass. The former president, Rafael Correa, said that they were jailing an innocent man. He called Glass a political prisoner and said the Ecuadorian authorities were following the same script as that applied to Dilma Rousseff, Lula, and Cristina Fernandez. More details on the next report.
Supporters and opponents of Vice President Jorge Glass gathered outside the National Court of Justice. They wanted to know the final verdict of Judge Edgar Flores on the charges of criminal association in the Odebrecht case.
The actions of engineer Jorge Glass are grounds for committing a crime, given that as a public official, as director of the Solidarity Fund, and as Vice President of the Republic, in association with José Coniciao Santos of Odebrecht, he arranged public contracts in strategic sectors in exchange of economic rewards.
After these conclusions, the judge's sentence was 6 years in prison for Jorge Glass, his uncle Ricardo Rivera, and the 3 others accused. The reactions were immediate.
We are going to appeal.
The Attorney General Carlos Vaca, who had presented the evidence in the trial that started on November 24th, also gave his reactions to the verdict.
Today's verdict against the accused and the 6 years sentence is the result of the teamwork carried out by the Attorney General's office throughout this period.
Glass's defense team rejected the sentence and said that they will immediately file for a provisional suspension of the sentence and for their client to be set free, and also that they will appeal the verdict itself.
This is an iniquitous sentence, a barbarous sentence that violates constitutional norms and the principles of criminal law. He will not resign as vice president. He is innocent of any crime.
Immediately after the verdict, the opposition bloc in the National Assembly asked the Speaker to move forward with a political trial of Jorge Glass to remove him as vice president.
So who is Jorge Glass, and why is his sentence a key issue for the political situation in Ecuador?
Jorge Glass, an electrical engineer, first became vice president in 2013 for the second term of former president Rafael Correa. He was very close to Correa and held key positions in telecommunications from 2007. His major role was to head the Ministry of Strategic Sectors, where he oversaw the construction of hydroelectric plants and dams, some of them built by Odebrecht. After the earthquake that killed more than 600 in the coastal area, he was in charge of the reconstruction efforts. He ran for a second term as the running mate of the current president Lenin Moreno. Deep differences between the two soon emerged, and Moreno removed Glass from his official duties after criminal allegations were presented.
Let's go live now to Telesur's Pablo Vivanco to know more on the case against Vice President Glass. Hello, Pablo. We've heard a lot about this case, but what have been the reactions after the verdict?
Yes, Carla. Immediately after the verdict, supporters and detractors of Jorge Glass took to the streets outside of the courtroom, as well as outside of the País Alliance headquarters here in Quito. Former President Rafael Correa was one of the first to respond to this. He took to Twitter, where he blasted the decision against Glass. Correa obviously insisting that Glass is innocent and also saying that the trial was full of irregularities. The former leader added that they will take this case to international bodies, a signal that this battle could spill over to courts outside of the country. Now, Correa and others have insisted that this trial is political and have likened it to the cases against former President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, as well as Argentina's Cristina Fernandez, among others. Glass obviously is going about the process of appealing the 6-year, $33 million verdict against him in Ecuador courts. However, the right-wing legislators in the National Assembly are pushing for impeachment proceedings to begin against him, and the Legislative Commission that's processing this request announced that they would be meeting today in order to review it.
Thank you very much, Pablo. That was Pablo Vivanco, our correspondent here in Quito. And in another case involving Odebrecht, lawmakers in Peru have revealed that President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski failed to disclose payments from the Brazilian construction company worth $4.8 million. Several of the payments were made when Kuczynski was serving as Economy Ministry or Prime Minister in the 2001 to 2006 in the government of President Alejandro Toledo. Following months of denial, the 79-year-old Wall Street investor finally acknowledged receipt of payments on Wednesday in a televised address.
I
have worked for 57 years of my life. The income I had as a professional have been registered, taxed, and banked. There's nothing wrong in that. Throughout my career as a public official, I have never favored any company. I am willing to clarify everything that needs to be clarified before Congress, before the public ministry, because I have nothing to hide.
Now in Havana, the 16th Political Council of the Bolivarian Alliance of the Peoples of Our Americas, the People's Trade Treaty, the ALBA-TCP, has opened with the aim of strengthening unity among its members. Our correspondent in Havana, Laura Prada, sends us this report from Cuba.
Hello, yes, nice to greet you. Indeed, in few moments we'll start the 16th Political Council of ALBA-TCP here in Havana with 15 members of this regional group. They will be working and on topics that concern the region, among others, and they will reiterate the proclaim set in 2014 that Latin America and the Caribbean is a peace zone. Besides this, early in the morning took place the 18th meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission Cuba and Venezuela that was presided by the Foreign Minister of Venezuela, Jorge Arriaza, and the Commerce and Foreign Inversion Ministry, Rodrigo Malmierca of Cuba, and they signed the protocol that will continue the cooperation between the two nations. This is all I have for now. I get back to you.
That was Laura Prada from Cuba. Now, in the last few minutes, the Federal Communications Commission in the United States has voted to repeal the Obama-era net neutrality protections. The move under the Trump administration was supported by the telecoms industry, which claims the regulations threaten to hamper broadband investment and innovation. The FCC chairman says the repeal is about getting the government to, quote, stop micromanaging the internet. The opponents say it could dramatically curtail access to internet. And now we go live to our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso. Hello, Jorge. So the FCC has finally repealed these regulations. What does that mean for internet users?
It means, Carla, an incredible repeal of that decision because we have seen all morning long in facing the FCC demonstrations against that ruling that is seen as very beneficial for large corporations and very detrimental for the freedom of expression and most of the groups that are using the freedom of internet to express their views and their content. Most definitely a big, if you want, a victory for Donald Trump that is pushing for the interests of the large corporations of this country and deregulation, but in this case is regulation in favor of the big corporations. But this situation is far from over, and again, we're talking about groups that has to be with NGOs, but also groups that has to be with some members of the Congress, and groups that has to do with people in Hollywood and people of different entertainment industries that are going to appeal this decision facing the justice.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your report. That was Jorge Gestoso, our correspondent from Washington, D.C. We'll be coming back with more news in a minute, so stay with us. This Sunday, Chile will hold the second round of presidential elections, as the candidates are closing their campaigns. Let's take a look at their proposals regarding international relations.
For some experts, Chile's international relationships are marked by their economic pragmatism and by being attached to state policies. They assure that this is the reason why, despite who is elected this Sunday, it will be very difficult to see significant changes in the matter.
Chile has always been part of regional organization that links us to the rest of Latin America, but also looking a lot more to the European Union, Asia, USA, and Canada.
During his presidential term, Sebastián Piñera, current candidate of the right wing, also ruled his international policy along those guidelines. However, at the end of the last year, it was revealed that a company purchased a Peruvian fishing company, and at the same time, in the International Court of Justice, a litigation concluded with a judgment that forced Chile to give maritime space to Peru.
Someone could say that it was an economic hunch, but that economic hunch is meant for businessmen, not for the president.
In September of this year, the Supreme Court decided to close the investigation that was carried out against Sebastián Piñera for the alleged use of privileged information for the benefit of his particular businesses. The attorney assigned to the case determined that, despite that there were ethically reproachable actions, it didn't represent a crime.
The president is taking advantage of an unfortunate decision when he was precisely the one running international policy.
On the other hand, Alejandro Guiller, the candidate backed by the parties that led Michelle Bachelet to office, point out that Chile's international policy must strengthen their real relationships with countries of the region.
I believe that we should strengthen our ties with Latin America in favor of the defense of free trade, of the diversification of our economies, of our integration, not only economical, but also political, so we can defend our interests in the international forums.
The candidate who wins on December 17th will take office and present his government cabinet on March 2018. That will include the Foreign Affairs Minister. And from that moment on, the tendency of the new government on international relationships will become clearer.
And now we move to Brazil, where the former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has said that he will prove his innocence before the courts and he will run for president in the next year's presidential elections. Lula is appealing against the 9-year prison sentence imposed by a judge earlier this year for alleged corruption. A higher court will decide on January 24th whether to confirm that sentence or not. During a Workers' Party event, members denounced what they called a judicial persecution to prevent Lula's presidential candidacy.
An election without Lula is a fraud. We are happy because justice is working again. He is ready for his defense to be evaluated because Lula's defense has all the elements to prove his innocence. Nobody is as prosecuted by the Brazilian justice system as former President Lula. They created a conspirative plot, and now they will have to apologize to him because he's innocent.
I'm already calm, even with the anticipation of the process, because I spent my whole life saying that the justice was slow, that it didn't work, but if my case will be used to make justice work again, well, Brazil needs it. It needs justice. I just hope that the judges who are assigned to my case read the process, the accusation, and the defense's evidence.
And in Bolivia, crimes against the environment are being incorporated into a new penal code. This could lead to imprisonment for up to 10 years for harm caused to Mother Earth. Our correspondent in La Paz has all the details.
The damage humans can cause to Mother Earth and its inhabitants has become a criminal offense in Bolivia, according to the new penal code, which is currently in the process of legislative approval.
Another crime that will be punishable as a criminal offense is circulating, transporting or keeping a deposit of radioactive materials or toxic waste that will threaten public health.
The new penal code establishes various degrees of responsibility for individuals or entities that cause damage to the environment.
So if the crime is committed with intent, punishment ranges from 5 to 10 years. Punishment for crimes without intent will range from 3 to 6 years. In the case of toxic waste or radioactive material, it's also between 5 and 10 years. Therefore, this is a modernization of the penal code.
Up until now, protection of environment has come under a law that sets compensation as the only punishment. Integrating it into the penal code will allow for punitive measures.
When the person causes irreversible environmental damage, which cannot be fixed and will be impossible to undo, the punishment is imprisonment for up to 10 years and a fine equivalent to 100% of the damage caused. The fine increases if the criminal offense causes the extinction of certain species.
This initiative means changing the relationship between the law, human beings, and Mother Earth.
With this new penal code, we will protect Mother Earth and all living things, giving them rights. We are moving from an anthropocentric approach to criminal justice, where only humans are the subjects of punishments and protection, to a logic elemental protection of the environment.
Over 40 years ago, the UN established April 22 as Earth Day. Since 2009, thanks to President Evo Morales, the word Mother was added to Earth Day. Bolivia has also promoted a Declaration of Rights for Mother Earth, similar to the Declaration of Human Rights.
Uruguay's lower house has approved a law against gender-based violence. It will create special facilities to attend to cases of domestic violence and promote other rights and guarantees.
The law project typifies the sexual abuse crime called until recently a violent attack to decency, and it now incorporates the rights of women for their testimony not to be disregarded and offers protection for child victims of abuse and violence.
This is integral because it provides prevention, also penal aspects that weren't contemplating some issues. So this allows a general policy that holds all kinds of violence accountable and establishes which ones are gender violence.
For most of the opposition, this law disregards some sectors of society.
This clearly discriminatory law protects women, but expressively excludes people from the male gender from its protection. These are also victims of gender violence, of domestic violence.
Other legislators, regardless of their being part of the opposition, voted in favor of this law.
We do support this law. We know it's a tool. We perfectly know this isn't the solution. But we have to start working for new elements to really solve the situation that all Uruguayans are going through.
This law seeks to guarantee the effective fulfillment of the right of women for a life free from gender violence, as it's quoted in its text, something quite difficult nowadays, when 35 women, 3 of them girls, were murdered this year.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Russian President Vladimir Putin has held his annual press conference at the World Trade Center in Moscow. Among numerous topics, Putin warned against escalation with North Korea, the risk of genocide in eastern Ukraine, the refugee situation in Syria, economic opportunities with China and in the Arctic, and US-Russia relations. He also confirmed his intention to run for another term. Our correspondent Hansel Oro was there and sent us this report.
Vladimir Putin gave his annual press conference where he spoke about the ties between Russia and the United States, especially after Russia's president was asked about the alleged contact his government maintained with Donald Trump during his presidential campaign. Putin denied this allegation and said Russia had nothing to do with the alleged hackers that interfered in the 2016 United States presidential elections. He also said this was an invention, the consequence of the political schizophrenia suffered by the Democrat Party, and that they are looking for different ways to impeach President Trump, hurting both countries' relationship. Regarding the conflict in Ukraine, President Putin said that Russia's military is no longer present there. He added that the United States could join the group of 4 countries, Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany, to help resolve the conflict in East Ukraine. Regarding North Korea, Putin said that Russia could mediate the conflict and get that country to abandon its nuclear program and ask South Korea and the United States to remove their military forces from the border. President Putin also mentioned he accepted the nomination to seek a 4th consecutive term in office.
That was Hansel Oro from Russia. Now Hamas is celebrating the 13th anniversary of its founding with a mass rally in Gaza City. Let's go to our correspondent Nur Harasim to learn more.
Today marks the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Islamist group Hamas and its militant brigade Al-Qassam brigade since this morning, and we saw hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets, waving the green flags of Hamas and heading to Al-Katiba Yard where the celebration and the ceremony is held. The number of people who gathered at Al-Katiba is estimated at hundreds of thousands of people. Basically, we did not get a specific number. Anyway, groups of these people, after the ceremony finished, they started heading to the borderline between Gaza and Israel in order to clash face to face with the Israeli forces in order to continue the wave of anger that started last week against the U.S. decision of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, there might be more casualties arriving to the hospitals today, not only here in the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank, as clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli forces continue in different parts and cities in the West Bank.
No Harasim from Gaza. Now here are some other stories that are making headlines around the world.
Over 6,700 Rohingya were killed in 1 month after violence broke in Myanmar in August, according to Doctors Without Borders. This figure is much higher than Myanmar's official figure of 400. MSF says more than 647,000 Rohingya have fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh since then. British Prime Minister Theresa May headed to Brussels to attend an EU summit after her humiliating defeat over the EU withdrawal bill. May is now facing the prospect that the vote may have damaged the EU's confidence in her ability to conduct Brexit negotiations. The chair of the Subcommittee on Human Rights for the European Parliament has called for the European immigration policy to be completely revised. This comes after accusations of human rights violations by Amnesty International against several European governments.
I think
that the complaints of Amnesty International are to be taken seriously. They describe the reality that currently exists in Libya, a reality caused by a strong migration process that comes from Africa and the Sahel, but also from the containment policies that some European countries are adopting on the theme of migration. These policies force people to remain in Libya in humanly unbearable conditions. I believe that the European immigration policy must be completely revised.
A suicide bomb in Somalia has killed 18 police officers and wounded 15 others during a parade at the country's main police academy. The bomber disguised himself as a policeman, according to officials.
It's been 6 months since the Grenfell Tower fire in London claimed 71 lives, an anniversary that has been marked by some 1,500 people at a service in St. Paul's Cathedral. The survivors of the tragedy, who are still awaiting housing and a full investigation, were joined by family members, the local community, rescue workers and volunteers, as well as the royal family and the Prime Minister. The blaze that took over the 24-story West London Tower block in the early hours of June 14th was sparked by a faulty fridge. And to talk about the Grenfell tragedy 6 months on, we are joined live from London by Angie from Grenfell Media Watch. Angie, so can you tell us how the survivors are dealing with this and what has happened in the past 6 months during these investigations?
Well, thank you. The last 6 months, things are moving quite slowly, helping the victims and the survivors to be out. It's moving slowly.
When the tragedies happened, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, said that they would rehouse everybody. That now has become evident that that is a totally unachievable aim, and people will be spending Christmas hotels. At least half the households who were displaced by the tragedy will not be in homes. They will be inside.
Thank you very much, Angie. So that was Angie from London on the story on the Grenfell Tower. So we've come to the end of this daily news brief. This and many other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.